Okay, so hello, good evening. Thank you so much for joining me and welcome to Freedom from Fear. So, thank you so much for taking the time out to listen to what I'm going to share with you this evening. I really appreciate it. As I said, the recording will be available for this, so I can send it on to you if you would like afterwards. If you do have any questions throughout, you're more than welcome to ask away. I probably won't call on you a whole lot. I will check in now and then just to make sure everything is making sense to you. But if you do have any questions or anything like that along the way, feel free to just pop them in the chat and I'll have a look through and just make sure everyone is taken care of. So if you are maybe feeling a bit stuck, you're a people pleaser, you're a perfectionist, you're holding yourself back, you find that you're worried what other people think, you maybe even feeling low in confidence, you're in the right place. And if you're not resonating with any of those things, but you're here, you're also in the right place because you are obviously meant to be here. So the reason that we are looking at these different things is because these are very common issues that I know many of us experience, and they're things that I have experienced myself in the past. And I have been looking into them and I work with clients all the time, and these are things that are recurring and these are things that are present in a lot of us. And that's why I wanted to have a look at them this evening, because when there are a lot of things happening for a lot of people with similar backgrounds, similar thinking patterns, and things like that, it interests me. I get quite intrigued about, well, what is the root of this? How can we dig into this a little bit deeper and figure out what is causing these kind of things? And that is the work that I do essentially. I did not introduce myself. So I'll just take a few steps back and say hello again. My name's Yvonne and I am a mindset coach. So that's what I do, is I help people to look at the things that are going on in their minds that are creating an experience that maybe is not optimal for them. So essentially anything that is low self-confidence, low self-esteem, not living our authentic truth kind of related things, they can all generally be tied back into how we're thinking, how we're speaking to ourselves. And that's what I help people to uncover, to move through, and to start looking at differently. So this evening, what we're going to cover is the big realization I had from my own journey and from working with clients. Like I said, seeing the similarities in these things and getting curious about what is underneath them. I don't really like surface level stuff. I like going in deep. I like figuring things out. And so that's what I've done. And that's what I'll be sharing with you this evening. So we'll be looking at what is actually hidden behind our blocks and why is it even there in the first place? What is this thing? And if you know the title of this masterclass, you're probably in tune with what it is, but I'll keep it a little bit exciting for the moment. So then also how to find freedom and boost your confidence. And then the 5 keys to keep in mind. These are just takeaway things. That's just informational basis, because the more understanding and awareness that we have, the more we can actually empower ourselves to make different choices. The more that we are consciously in tune with ourselves, with what's going on, like I said, behind the scenes, under the depths in there, we can actually start changing how we interact with them and start making different choices that really serve us much better. So why of all things did I really want to talk about fear? Because fear is, of course, the thing is that behind all of these other things. When I started looking into them, when I started kind of pulling out the different threads, it's like, what is beneath all of this stuff? And it just kept coming back to fear. It was this recurrent theme with others, with myself. I noticed in my own journey when I had perspective from my own journey as well and could see different things playing out. I was like, there it is, there it is, there it is. It just kept showing up. And as Dale Carnegie says, you can conquer almost any fear if you will only make up your mind to do so. For remember, fear doesn't exist anywhere except in the mind. And as I mentioned, I work with mindset. That is what really interests me. That's what I really get excited about and very passionate about, because we're always making up things in our mind. We're always telling ourselves stories. We're always reacting from this place of what's going on behind the scenes, what we're telling ourselves in our head. So if we can uncover those and have a look at, well, what actually is that, then we get to empower ourselves to make new choices. So with these patterns I was speaking about, like perfectionism or people pleasing, or even procrastination shows up, or when we're not setting boundaries, when we're not asking for what we want, when we're not allowing ourselves to be our true selves, all of these things, they're what stop us from loving our lives. They're what stop us from really stepping into it, really being all of ourselves, really allowing our voice to be heard, really just owning our life. And if there's one thing that I can advocate for, that I really just want to share with everyone, is that experience of owning your life fully, of really just feeling that freedom to create your life how you want to live it and to love living that life. So when there's all this stuff in my beautiful clients, the people who are absolutely incredible and inspirational, and yet there was these similar things coming up with myself, these similar things coming up. And I was like, oh, I see what it is. As David Hawkins says, he plays out with people. It's like the then what game. So it's nearly like, okay, I'm a perfectionist. Everything has to be perfect. Well, if it's not, then what? And then what? And then what? And when you do that with so many of these challenges that so many of us are experiencing, The problem is not the problem. The thing that presents is not the real issue. The issue is the thinking behind that thing. It's what we're telling ourselves about that thing. It's actually what is creating the thoughts behind that thing, which is even deeper still. And that's where I came to the conclusion of what it is. And it's fear. It's fear showing up in all of these places. It's fear trying to dictate our lives, trying to keep them small, trying to limit us. But it's also fear that is trying to keep us safe. So it's working in this very interesting way where we're doing these things and we don't know why we're doing them, or we're doing these things and it's this pattern and we're like, why do I keep going back to that? Why do I keep tripping myself up? Why do I have such unreasonably high expectations for myself? And it comes back to that same root for so many of us. So just if you are getting frustrated with yourself, if you are noticing a lot of those traits or qualities or patterns showing up in your life over and over again, just know that it's very common. It's not just you that's doing that. There's not something wrong with you because you're finding yourself in that place. The thing is, and as we'll learn as I continue talking a bit more about fear and what it is, it's that it's subconscious and it has a lot of pulling power over our lives. So that's why I wanted to bring it to the surface, like I said. And as Carl Jung says, until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our life and we will call it fate. We'll think this is all there is. This is just how I am. My life has to be like this. I can't ask that. I can't say that. I can't do this. And we're living in this constricted little tiny world of can't, which is based on fear. I don't like that. That's why I'm all about daring to live. I'm not going to allow that if I can. So what I want to share with you is how we can move through that, how we can relate to fear in a different way and really empower ourselves to take the steps that feel good, even when it does come up, even when we do feel it, to realize that we can feel that fear and we can do it anyway. And so, as I mentioned, this became prevalent in my own journey when I started reflecting back on it, because like I said, a lot of things are common. A lot of us are having those same thoughts that we think are so shameful that nobody else is thinking them, or we're the crazy one. It's very common. A lot of us are having these similar things. And in my experience, I thought how I was expressing my challenges was crazy. And I had an eating disorder, as I've mentioned in other masterclasses. I had depression and anxiety and these experiences coming up in my life. And when you look at them and when you realize again that the problem is not the problem, that the problem was not the food, the problem was not my body, the problem was not what I thought it was, you get curious and you start exploring, well, what is it? What is beneath that? And with eating disorders, quite often what it is the feeling of not being good enough. The feeling of not enough drives so many of these behaviors in our life. We are consistently just trying to measure up in this world. A lot of us will try and do anything to reach expectations, to feel as if we're doing what we should be doing. We are trying to mold and shape ourselves to be acceptable to others, in the eyes of others. We're doing all of these things to try and, meet this expectation or standards that is quite often an imagined thing that we tell ourselves has to be happening, or that we expect other people to be expecting of us, when actually it's often not really the case. So that's what I realized about it. And when I started looking at other examples, if you think of public speaking, a lot of people will say that they would nearly rather be the ones in the casket at a funeral than the ones up there doing the eulogy. They do not want to be speaking in front of people. That's the severity that we have. But if you look at that and you ask, are they afraid of speaking? Do they not speak every single day in their lives? Yes, like people are capable of speech, and yet the idea of speaking in front of other people terrifies them. So it's not about the speaking, it's not about the eating, it's not about the body. These are all just ways that fear is manifesting in our lives. They are ways that we are trying to keep ourselves safe, trying to protect ourselves, and trying to work out how to feel okay. So with the public speaking, it's the meaning that we've made up, the meaning that we've attached to that experience, the ideas that we've come up with, the stories that we tell ourselves coming from that place of fear, coming from, what if I'm not good enough? What if everybody laughs at me? What if I forget my words? What if I make a mistake? All of these things will come up in our minds and will terrify ourselves to the point that we won't do them. And it's not just public speaking, and it's not just eating, and it's not just these things. We do this all the time in our lives. We hold ourselves back from going out and going after what we really want. We hold ourselves back from living the life that we really want to live. We're not voicing our truth. We're not being all of ourselves. We're not wearing what we want to wear. We're not expressing ourselves in the ways we want to. Some of us, myself included, like, have had a really challenging time even making a decision or forming an opinion. These things are not how I believe we're supposed to be living. I think we have these ideas, we have these authentic idiosyncrasies Not sure. We have these things within us, these unique qualities that make us who we are for a reason. And it's not to hide them away. It's not to keep them quiet. It's not to scare ourselves out of ever using them, ever expressing them. No, they're within us for a reason. And so this is why I wanted to talk about it, because I evidently feel very strongly about it. I just believe that if we can understand fear, if we can see how it's showing up in our lives, see that it's not about trying to be perfect. It's not about trying to please everyone. It's not about just criticizing ourselves for the crack. It's none of these things. It's from a deeper reason. And once we start to look at that and uproot it and see it for what it is, and see that it's just a scared little aspect of us that is trying its best, we can relate to it differently. And when we relate to it differently, our whole experience changes. We're not fighting against ourselves anymore. We're not flighting or flight or freezing. We're not doing these things in the same ways. We're starting to live. We're starting to claim our power back. And we're starting to make different choices. So that's why I'm talking about this. So I just want to check in before I continue. Have you got any questions? Is there any key takeaways that you'd like to share? You're welcome to unmute yourself and chat away, or if you'd like to pop it in the chat either, I'll give you a second. If there isn't anything, I will continue, so don't feel under any pressure. All good, thank you. Appreciate the thumbs up. Amazing, thank you so much. Okay, I'm just going to take a little bit of water. Got myself all riled up there. Awesome. So what do we need to know about fear? Because we're talking about this thing, and it's not about being afraid of spiders, and it's not about heights, and it's not even about public speaking. As I said, it's a different entity. It's something else. It's something with something else going on. So we need to start understanding it, because as I harp on all the time, awareness is our key. That is our pathway to doing things different. That is our pathway to freedom. When we start becoming aware of things that are stopping us, things that are holding us back, things that are making our lives be more challenging than they need to be, when we have that awareness, we get our power. We start to see that there is alternatives. There is an expanded view of these things. There is another perspective and another way of seeing this. So what we need to know about fear is, where does it live? So we can find it. Essentially, that is the first key. Like, where is it? Where is it coming from? So it lives in our subconscious. That's what I touched on slightly earlier. So 95% of our mind is subconscious, 5% is conscious. So we think we have control and we think that we are choosing our thoughts, or we're telling ourselves nice things, and we can do that. Definitely not knocking doing that. But there is a lot of pulling power beneath the surface that we are not even aware of. And that is living in our subconscious and in our body as well. So these things like our emotions, like fear, these things live within us, and they are subconscious, they're unconscious to us. We're not aware of how they are manifesting. And that's why fear can be very reactive. It can be very sudden. It just does things. It's not like it's responding. It's not kind of taking its time and consciously, logically rationalizing things out. It just kind of does things. It just reacts, which is fantastic when we are in a dangerous situation, because it has a purpose. Of course it does. We don't have anything within us that doesn't make sense. There's a reason for everything. So it's living in our subconscious, ready to do something about things. And with that pulling power, it can just do things without us realizing. So say, for example, from my own experience, I was terrified of needles and getting blood tests. And there was a period of my life where I had to go and get them. And I remember my therapist at the time, she was talking about, oh, have you booked that in? And straight away, I got triggered. My fear came out and I was like, no, why? And I was very defensive, and there was this reactive. So reactivity can be a very good indicator that there's some fear hiding within there. If I felt totally okay with that and I was accepting of the situation and I was all good with that, I was coming from a place of love, there wouldn't have been that reactivity. I wouldn't have been getting defensive. I wouldn't feel threatened. And it's when we feel threatened, when people point out certain things, when people say certain things, we take it personally. When there's that reaction, it's indicative of something else going on within us. And it's quite often fear. It's the fear that we've been found out, or we're not good enough, or we're vulnerable, or a lot of these things tend to come to pass. So just so you know where it's living, it's in subconscious. So we're not choosing a lot of the things that we're doing as it's manifesting, like the perfectionism and things like that. They have occurred because of where it comes from. And where it comes from is survival. Like I said, if we are in an actual survival situation, bring on the fear, give it to me so I know what to do. So I do react, so I don't just do absolutely nothing, unless it's manifesting as freeze, in which case I will do nothing. But whatever's appropriate for the survival is what I need to do. So it's there to keep us safe. It's there to look after us. It's there to protect us. So it is coming from a nice place, even when it doesn't really come out in very enjoyable ways. It means well. I like to believe anyway. I think it's more helpful to believe that it means well. It's trying to look after me. It's trying to keep me alive. Thing is survival thinking, stress responses, all of these things, they keep us only thinking about one thing: survival. They are not rational. They're not really logical. They're not understanding fully the whole context of the situation necessarily. And when it's survival, it's like this evolutionary thing. So it's going back. It hasn't really caught up to the world we're living in now, where we respond with fear to things that are not actually threatening. We respond with fear to a dirty look someone might give us, or from speaking in public, or things like that. These are not life-threatening situations, and we have been kind of conditioned to start responding to them in the same way that our ancestors would have responded to actual fear requiring situations, for want of better terminology. So a lot of our fears actually come from when we're children. When we're 0 to 7, we're imprinting, we're learning, we're gaining all the conditioning from our wonderful caregivers, and they are passing on the things that they are doing, their behaviors, their ways of being. A lot of it, again, subconscious, and that's where it goes to live. So a lot of our fears actually come from that period of time where we've started making up meanings about things. So say, for example, I'm a child and something happens maybe with a friend group, and I go to say something and nobody hears me. I could make that mean that nobody cares about what I have to say, and internalize as a child that could actually end up being, I shouldn't really speak in groups, or nobody wants to hear what I have to say. I'll just stay quiet, depending on the situation. Obviously, that was quite a basic example, but those kind of things, those kind of situations as a child, they are very formative, and we take these things on. And there may be many occurrences where you go to mom and dad and they're busy, and then you take that to mean that your needs don't matter, or you make up the meaning that they don't care about what you have to say, or you go to do something and they don't approve. So you think, I shouldn't do what I feel like doing. What I think about things is wrong. I am not enough. Like, we are not choosing to do this as children, but this is what we're doing. We're taking on these meanings and we're creating our world based on what we're perceiving, based on what we are attaching to the different events and circumstances in our lives. So a lot of these meanings can stay with us until we're adults because we don't challenge them. They go and they get created, and then they go and live in our subconscious, and then they'll just drive our life because that's 95% of our mind. That's 95% using its pulling power to react to similar situations. So say, for example, if that initial one, I'm a child, I go to speak to a group of friends, nobody listens to me, or somebody laughs at me, even worse, and I internalize that shame and think I should never speak in front of groups. As I grow up as an adult, I'm not going to go for speaking jobs, or I'm not going to be a speaker if I don't address that fear. If I allow it to keep running my life, I might not speak up when I feel like I really want to share my opinion. I might not talk about things that are important to me. I might not try and make new friends. I might hold myself back to such an extent because as a child, I made up the meaning that nobody wants to hear what I have to say. And that internalizes and it becomes a fear. So unfortunately, this inner child within us could be making a lot of our adult decisions and we don't even realize. And we're actually just showing up to the world as a terrified 7-year-old, putting off things that could be fantastic for us because of the experience we had as a child, the meanings we created, and the fact that we haven't challenged these, we haven't looked at them, which is why it's a beautiful thing that you are here this evening paying attention to this, because now you have that opportunity to take your power back and to look at these things and be like, well, actually, where is the rationale for that? Is that actually true, what I've been telling myself about that situation? Could it be possible that I can actually get through it and survive? Because that's the thing, we're reacting as if we're not going to survive these things, but of course we can. Of course we have the capacity to get through them and to get by and to continue living our lives the way we want to be living them. So there used to be, and I probably would have said it in other things, 3 universal fears. And I'm not saying there used to be like as if they disappeared, but that was kind of the school of thought, was not being good enough, not being loved, and not belonging. So I'm just kind of saying that because you might have heard me say before, there's 3, and then kind of upgraded training that I've heard from Tony Robbins, who would have spoke about the 3 universal ones in the past. What he said more recently is that it's essentially just comes down to I'm not enough. And sorry, just really dropped everything. And then when we have that feeling of I am not enough, we make up the meaning that therefore I am not loved. And if you think about a child, about a baby, about a young person, if we think that we cannot be loved, we're kind of screwed. We cannot actually survive in this world. If we think that our parents are not going to be there for us, if we're not enough, that we're not worthy of their love, if we're not deserving, and therefore we will not be loved, of course fear is going to come from that. Of course our life is going to be turned upside down by that, because humans, how long are we dependent on our caregivers? Most of the formative years of our life, like, we're not stepping out of the womb walking around. We don't do that like other animals do. We're very dependent. And if we internalize this idea that we are not enough, then we think, I am not going to be loved. It is survival for us. That is how it becomes a genuine fear within us, because if we're not enough, if we're not good enough, how are we going to fend for ourselves? We simply cannot do it. So the main one, and the one that I hear from most clients, most people I speak to, like, it's very, very common to not feel good enough, which is kind of like heartbreaking to me in a way, because I know what that feels like. I know how devastating it is, and I know how prevalent it is in so many people. And the thing about it as well is, like I shared earlier, it was at the crux of so many challenges that I experienced. It was what stopped me from feeling like my body was okay. It stopped me from feeling like I deserved certain foods or different things like that. Like, it just minimized my life to such an extent that's why I want to help people get past that. It's just too important that we realize how enough we actually are. It's too important that we stop living life from this place, stop engaging with this idea that we're not enough. Because a lot of the time, even when I ask people what would enough be, we don't even know. We haven't even conceptualized what we feel like we're not. We don't even realize the kind of standards that we're holding ourselves to, the fact that we believe that who we are, what we have to offer as a human, like, is inadequate. We're all entirely adequate. And again, having this fear of not being enough, it is devastating, not just to ourselves, how we feel about ourselves, but to how we show up in our lives, how we think that it's not worth asking for what we want. We think that we don't deserve to express our needs, thinking that our dreams don't really matter because who are we anyway? We're never going to be capable. We don't have the skills. All of these things we tell ourselves. And there's one thing that you take away from this, is just that you are absolutely enough. And I know that if you feel like that, I know how challenging that can be, but know that you can come through that. You can learn that you are enough. You can change these things. We can change and reframe all of these things, all of the fears. Even, they don't have to stick around, because it's just a meaning we made up. It's just a story in our head. It's just a response that our body has been conditioned to have. We can reprogram these things. We actually do have a lot of power, even in the subconscious that has a lot going on, but we can make that stuff conscious, wipe it away, reprogram, and instill new subconscious things in there. So there's always hope, of course. So what does our fear want? As I mentioned, it wants to protect us. It wants to keep us safe. It's actually quite a nice thing when it's behaving. So it's looking after us. And I think that's the important thing to recognize within this. It's not about fighting fear. It's not about trying to eradicate fear. It's not about getting really pissed off with fear. It's about learning how to work with it. Because as Elizabeth Gilbert will say, like, fear is going to be on the journey. She's speaking about creativity, but she'll say we're all creative in life. So she's speaking about life as well, from my view of it. But she'll say fear is going to be in the journey, but fears can sit in the back, and it doesn't get to choose the snacks. It doesn't get to decide where we're going. We are in the driver's seat, but it can pipe up if we're in immediate danger. It can pipe up if it sees something that's going to happen that will put us at risk, that will threat our survival. But it does not get to drive. It does not get to make decisions. And that's a key thing to keep in mind. This isn't about becoming fearless, because I don't believe that that's a thing. But then we're not human. We're here to try and survive and thrive. And fear is going to come up. It's just part of us. And if there's one thing I've learned about emotions and fear and all of these things, what you resist persists, and we can't just keep suppressing them, pushing them down and trying to tell them to shut up. We've got to hear them. We've got to allow them, and we've got to speak to them. Sorry, just someone join in. Okay, so I will continue. So it's opposite. After having fear rising up, what the opposite of it is love. And so love is the antidote to fear. And this is something that I would have thought was the cheesiest thing ever in the past. If someone had told me this, I would have been like, oh God, fucking hippies. But it's true. We either have one motivator or the other. It's fear or love. And that's what drives a lot of our decisions. That's what drives what we do. That's what drives how we show up and who we are in our lives. So fear can keep us stuck. It can keep us small. It can keep us terrified and afraid to do anything, or we can move into love. So it typically is like fear and doubt or love and trust. And we want to be moving more towards love. We want to be embracing love more. We want to be learning how to let it in. And that's why I wanted to make that key point about it not being about trying to get rid of fear or getting mad at fear or like fighting with it all the time, but actually just seeing it for what it is. It's trying to protect us. It's trying to keep us safe. It's trying to look after us. So it's okay that it's there, but it's in the back seat. It's not driving, and we can lovingly relate to it. We can hear it as it comes up. And it's like, yeah, I get where you're coming from. That could be devastating if I have that experience, but I trust myself to have it anyway. That's something else that I want to mention. A lot of the time, what fear is about, it's not even about the thing, like I mentioned with the public speaking, it's not about the speaking, it's about the feelings that we think we're going to have as a result of that experience. So say, for example, we're afraid of asking for what we want. We're afraid of the answer being no. We're afraid of that rejection. We're afraid of the feeling of being rejected and the feeling of maybe shame or embarrassment or again feeling inadequate. These things are very painful for us, and that's why fear is nearly trying to prevent us from having those feelings. So a lot of the time our fear of life is actually fear of the feelings that we're afraid of it creating. So when love comes in and when we start utilizing the love within us to relate to the fear and to relate to our experience differently, we can call on it and be like, okay, I'm afraid to do this thing, or I'm afraid of making a mistake. I'm afraid of being a failure. I'm afraid of being a success, like any of these things that come up. Love is the voice that comes in and says, I know, look, I totally get that you're afraid. This is a scary thing. It's okay. And maybe if it doesn't go well, we'll feel awful feelings, but isn't it worth doing it? Isn't this something that you really want to do? Why not go ahead and do it anyway, and I'll have your back? Because that's the key thing that I think many of us are missing. When fear comes up, we go with it as if it's the authority on our lives. We go with it because it can be very loud. We don't realize that we can actually train ourselves and program ourselves to have love louder and to have love come up and be like, oh, I know you're trying to avoid this, you're trying to step away from this, you're trying to run from this, but I know this is important to you. I know living your life authentically and truly is important to you. I know you want to become a speaker. I know you want to try something new. I know you want to make new friends. I know you want to have a relationship, whatever it is. There's something in us that wants these things. And fear might try and come up and tell us that all of these amazing, very detailed stories that it might come up with, all the worst case scenarios, all the reasons why not. Love is here to tell you why. Love is here to tell you that that is a very beautiful story that you've come up with, fear, but it's actually not based on anything true. We cannot predict the future, but we can try our best to create it, so we can create it how we want it to be. And that's where having that love for ourselves is so key to bring it in. So any questions, any key takeaways there, just let me know. You can pop them in the chat again if you like, or you can give an out thumbs up if that suits. Thank you. Okay, wonderful. I just wanted to say welcome, Neve. Sorry I didn't say hello when you popped in. Thank you so much for joining. So I'm gonna go on. I can pop you on the recording so you have the start of it as well. Awesome. Okay. So may your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears. And this is what it's really all about. Because when we're acting from a place of fear, like I've said, it's very limiting. It's very restrictive. It's just not nice, is it? I've used a lot of my words this evening. Now, it's very much something that keeps us stuck, and it keeps us feeling like our life is over here and we're over here, and we can't seem to bridge that gap. We can't seem to reach it, because every time we try something new, or every time we try and step out of our comfort zone, fear starts shouting, and we're like, oh yeah, no, you're right, I'll stay here. So what I'm hoping to instill, what I'm hoping to share is that your life starts reflecting your hopes more than your fears. So if you do hope to become more confident, if you do hope to step into your power, if you do hope to start speaking up, start saying the things that you want to say, start using your voice, start trying new things, start embracing being a beginner, start making more mistakes and feeling fine about it. If any of those things are what you hope to do, then I'm hoping that you have the knowledge now, the awareness now to start reflecting your life in that way, to start choosing these things and to start really stepping into it. So how do we overcome fear? We choose love, as cheesy as that may sound. And this is, again, it's about noticing when it's coming up. So as I mentioned at the beginning, it's showing up in all these different ways. And a key way to recognize if it is fear at play is to play the then what game. So if we are worried about making a mistake, it's like, oh, I can't do that because it's not good enough right now, or I can't share this because it's not perfect. So play with that. What if I was to share that? What if I was to do that thing? Then what? Well, then someone might slag me, or I might get criticized or whatever. It's like, well, then what? Well, then I might feel terrible or inadequate, or I might feel rejected, or I might not get the job. Then what? Like, just play it out until you get to that point where you recognize that probably what is driving this whole thing is the idea that I may not be enough and therefore I will not be loved. Or it could be along those lines of not belonging, of being rejected. All of those things tend to come to the same place, though, where we just feel inadequate. We just feel like we're not worthy. And if the more that we can step into choosing love and to recognizing this when it comes up and being like, oh, but then I might make a mistake. What would you say to a child? Because our fears are created when we're so young. So if you can imagine that younger self, what would you say to them? What would you respond when they are terrified of doing this thing, when you notice that fear rising up in yourself? Are you going to tell them to stop, or to just give up, or to, try and fight with that or suppress it or whatever else? Or are you going to tell them that it's going to be okay, that they can do this, that courage is fear walking, which means that the best antidote to fear is taking action, and that you can do this. The biggest thing we can do here is choose love and having our own backs, as I say here on this slide. So the first thing is letting go of that resistance. That's what I noticed in myself a lot in my journey as well. When I was feeling resistance in my life, when I was feeling like I want to do something and I'm not doing it, and I start noticing myself not doing it, that resistance tended to be based around fear, tended to be coming from a fear-based place where I'm telling myself the story of not being good enough. And I'm telling myself that I can't do that because, or I can't say that because, or I shouldn't do that because, and all of these stories, just made up shit that I'm telling myself to try and get me out of it. When you notice this, what you've got to do is to let go of that resistance and feel the feelings. It might feel scary, it might feel uncomfortable. You're literally built to handle those feelings. Otherwise, your body would not hold them. So we can just let go of that resistance, feel what we need to feel, recognize, okay, I'm feeling some fear right now. Okay, that's okay. It's just trying to protect me from feeling other things, from feeling shame or scared in a bigger way, or from feeling inadequate, from feeling rejected, any of those things, from feeling loneliness. It's okay. It's trying to protect me. I get it. Now I'm going to take action anyway. And look, it's not going to feel great the whole time. I'm not going to say like, that's all you have to do and you'll feel fantastic. No, but the more that you do it, the more you'll build up that muscle and show your subconscious that there's nothing to be afraid of. And that's when you're instilling this new program. That's when you're rewriting the script that is telling your life story. That's when you are changing these things and actually giving yourself back that power. So as you are taking action, the key thing is to have your own back, is to be that friend to yourself, is to be that support, and to be the one cheering yourself on, because we can look outside of ourselves for it all we like, and we might get it sometimes, but the most sustainable, ongoing way of actually getting that credit and acknowledgement and boost of courage is to give it to ourselves. That's the best thing we can do. And it'd be more powerful if it comes from ourselves and we start showing ourselves that we do actually believe in us and we do actually know that we can do this. Because how many times have you been afraid to do something and then afterwards like, oh, it wasn't that bad, was it? I could actually do that fine, no bother. And we show ourselves that we can do it. And even after doing that, sometimes we'll still be scared next time, but we'll be a little bit less scared. And the more that we do it, the more that we show ourselves that we can keep showing up, the more that we empower ourselves to realize how capable we are. As I've said, like a lot of what fear is feeling that we cannot handle our feelings. All we have to do then is to show ourselves we can, show ourselves a life of can rather than a life of can't. And that will be the biggest game changer, recognizing our own capabilities. We are amazing. Any of you here, any of you watching this, you're amazing. And I don't need to know you to say that, because there is so much within you who have already come through so much. You've overcome challenges before, you've faced fear before, you have this resilience and tenacity within you to persevere and to follow through for yourself. And this is just about tapping into that muscle, making it as strong as you can, because your life deserves it. You deserve it. You deserve to be living in a way that feels really good for you, that feels really empowering, that represents the life you want to be living. So on that note, any questions, anything taken away from that point, feel free to let me know. Or if we're all good, thank you. Good old thumbs up. Lovely, lovely. Okay. So gotta finish up here with some keys to keep in mind so that you have some things to remember about fear and you can start taking this into your life. And just keep in mind, fears didn't arrive in a day. We didn't just come up with them and that's it. It's been with us for a long time, quite a lot of them. So it's important to give yourself time to practice this, to start relating to yourself differently, to start recognizing when it's coming up, to start creating a space between that reaction and allowing yourself to respond. So it's not like this, but it's more like, oh, and you can do things a bit differently and give yourself that power back. So acknowledge the fear and challenge it. Yeah, exactly. So you'll hear it coming up and it's like our emotions. We just allow them to be there and be like, it's okay that you're here. I get it, but you're not driving. I'm driving. I'm going to make the choices from here because we don't want to just ignore these things. We don't want to just tell them to go away or be like, oh, I'm fearless. I don't need to listen to myself, because that's not acknowledging it. It's not integrating it into us and allowing a whole part of ourselves. Like that's part of your inner child. That's part of who you are, is afraid right now. And what they need is to just be told that it's going to be okay. They need to be reassured. Reassurance is so key. If we can give that to ourselves, then it quietens down. But if we ignore it, it'll get louder and it'll just keep showing up and keep screaming out until you pay attention. So the first thing to know is it is normal. We all have it. That's okay that we feel scared of things. It's totally okay. It's not a weakness. It's no judgment on ourselves, or it's no lack of our character or anything like that. It is a totally natural thing for us to experience. So don't beat yourself up if you are feeling afraid of things. That's how you have evolved and become human, and stayed human is from having this. It's a survival instinct, as I say in the next point. So it's all about survival, not logic. So a key thing to keep in mind when you're thinking of fear is that it is false evidence appearing real, FEAR. It's just, again, these stories made up, thought they made sense when we were a child, kept them with us into adulthood. And now it's like, oh, what's that even about? If we dig into it, it's like, oh, actually, I probably could have survived that. I actually could be okay with that. I actually have no reason not to trust myself to handle those feelings. So it's not logical, but you are. So bring in that logic and start relating to it and be like, actually, like, I hear you, but I don't think that's really applicable in this situation. So it's all right if you just cool the jets and I'm going to go on with my life. And that's how you can move through it. So the third thing is it's usually about a feeling that we think we can't handle. So I've said it kind of in a few examples, but just to keep that in mind, that it's not really about what it tends to be about. Like a lot of our problems aren't really about what they seem to be about. So if you dig into it a little more, then you might see that it's actually that I'm afraid of being rejected, or I'm actually afraid of the shame. Sometimes we're even afraid of feeling happy or excited about things because we're not used to feeling those things. It hasn't been safe for us in the past to feel those things. And so we'll avoid them as well and we'll shut them down. So quite often fear is manifesting in a way that is disguising the fear of what it really is, which is a feeling that we are afraid of. So the next thing is it's not going anywhere. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but it's not. And that's good because it's going to keep us alive. But again, it does not have to be in the driver's seat. So just kick it back to the back and don't let it choose the tunes or anything like that. And you will get on just fine. And the fifth thing, the key thing, is that the more we can be in the energy of love, the quieter it's going to get. So we can be in love and trust or fear and doubt. And we want to be moving towards love and trust as much as we can. And the key to that is really just how we're speaking to ourselves, how we're telling ourselves the reassuring, nice things that we need to hear in those moments where we feel all sweaty and shaky and terrified. We need to be that voice of reason for ourselves. I was like, it's okay, you've got this, you can do this. And just soothing ourselves in those ways, that's key to what we need. So thank you all so much for listening. If you do have any questions or key takeaways, let me know now. And then I just want to share something with you just for being here.